Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earthship called Intrepid and looked at the big screen showing enemy ships coming toward them. The alien ships were huge and shiny and moved in perfect lines like they had done this 1,000 times before. These were the Zephyrian ships, and everyone in the galaxy was afraid of them because they had destroyed many worlds and killed billions of people. Jake felt his heart beating fast, but he kept his face calm because his crew needed to see him strong. Around him, 20 other people worked at their stations, checking weapons and shields and trying to make sure everything was ready for the fight that was coming. Lisa Grant sat at the communication station, and her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried to keep contact with the other Earthships. The main screen suddenly changed and showed the face of an alien that looked like a giant bug, with 4 eyes and sharp teeth. This was Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian Dominion, and he was smiling in a way that made Jake feel cold inside. Behind the alien commander, Jake could see other aliens from different worlds all watching and waiting to see what would happen to the humans. Commander Vexhai started talking, and his words came through the translator in perfect English that sounded cold and mean. He said that the humans were primitive and stupid, and that their 23 ships could never beat his 300 warships. He said that the Galactic Council had already decided that Earth would become a new colony for the Zephyrian Dominion and that all humans would be taken away to work as slaves on other worlds. Lizard-looking alien called Slathek leaned forward and said that maybe they should keep some humans alive to study, because their simple minds might be interesting to watch. Another alien that looked like it was made of light called Zixara started laughing and said that human weapons were so weak they could barely hurt a small moon. Then a robot-looking alien called Constructor Unit Prime 7 said that their computers had calculated that humans had only a tiny chance of winning, and that the battle would be over very quickly. Jake listened to all of this, and felt anger building up inside him, but he kept his voice steady and polite when he answered. He told the aliens that Earth would not surrender and that they were ready to fight. This made all the aliens laugh even louder, because they thought it was funny that such weak creatures would try to fight against the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Commander Vexhai told Jake that humans had 1 day to change their minds and surrender, or else Earth would be destroyed and all humans would be killed or taken as slaves. Then the screen went dark, and Jake was alone with his crew again. He looked around at the 20 people working on the bridge and saw that they were all scared, but also determined to fight for their home world. Amy Watson was the chief engineer, and she was checking power levels to make sure all systems were working properly. Kevin Blake was the weapons officer, and he was running tests on their plasma guns to make sure they would fire when needed. Ben Carter was the tactical officer, and he was looking at maps of space trying to figure out the best way to fight such a large enemy fleet. Rachel Kim was the science officer, and she was working on something secret that only a few people knew about. Jake asked for a status report, and Ben told him that all 23 Earth ships were ready to fight. The ships had names like Guardian and Defender and Storm and Voyager, and each one carried brave people who were willing to die to protect their families back on Earth. Ben also said that something called Project Mindbridge was working and ready to use. Rachel Kim looked up from her station and told Jake that the quantum entanglement network was stable and working across all the human ships. She said that every person in the fleet was now connected through something called a neural interface that let them share thoughts and information instantly across any distance. This was the secret weapon that Earth had been working on for 3 months. 3 months ago, human scientists had discovered something amazing while studying how the brain works with quantum physics. They found out that human brains were different from all other alien brains because humans could actually share thoughts and work together as one big mind, while still keeping their own personalities and memories. No other species in the galaxy could do this. While the aliens had spent thousands of years building better weapons and stronger ships, humans had found something much more powerful. They had learned how to make their minds work together so that thousands of people could think as one person but still be themselves. This meant that human ships could move and fight together perfectly because all the crews were thinking the same thoughts at the same time. Jake nodded and said that the aliens had seen their ships and weapons, but they had not seen what humanity could really do when they worked together. The neural interfaces looked like tiny pieces of metal that stuck to the back of each person's head, and they were almost impossible to see. The aliens had no idea that every human in the fleet was connected to every other human through quantum energy that moved faster than light. Dr. Helen Torres was working deep underground in a mountain in Colorado, where she had built the most secret laboratory on Earth. She was watching computer screens that showed information flowing between the human ships, and 17,000 human minds. Her assistant, Dr. Mark Davis, told her that the neural links were working perfectly, and that the entire fleet was now acting like one giant brain with thousands of parts. Back on the bridge of the Intrepid, Jake felt something strange happening in his mind as his consciousness began to expand beyond his own thoughts. He could suddenly sense what Lieutenant Carter was thinking about tactics and feel Engineer Watson's deep knowledge of how the ship's power systems worked. He could experience Navigator Sam Brooks' understanding of space and time and how to move through it. But this sharing of minds did not feel scary or overwhelming. Instead, it felt natural and right, like this was how humans were always meant to be. Each person was still themselves with their own thoughts and feelings, but now they were also part of something much bigger and more powerful than any individual could be alone. The Zephyrian fleet was getting closer, and their weapons were charging up with the same energy signatures that had destroyed planets and killed billions of creatures across the galaxy. But they did not know that they were not fighting 23 separate ships with individual crews. They were about to face something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy. They were going to fight against 17,000 human minds working as one perfect organism that could think and react faster than any computer, and coordinate better than any army that had ever existed. Aboard the biggest Zephyrian ship called Devastator, Supreme Commander Thexol looked at the computer screens showing the human fleet arranged around their blue and green planet Earth. His 4 eyes focused on the tactical display, and he felt very confident because his ships were so much more powerful than anything the humans had. The human ships looked small and weak compared to his massive warships that could destroy entire moons with their weapons. His tactical officer gave him a report about the human weapons and defenses. The officer said that human weapons were simple, plasma guns that could only shoot accurately for short distances, and that their shields were basic electromagnetic fields that could be broken easily. The computer calculated that it would take only 14 time units to completely destroy all human ships and win the battle. Thexol clicked his jaw parts together in happiness, because he knew that the Galactic Council had promised to make him the governor of the entire solar system after this easy victory. Earth would become a perfect farm world once all the humans were moved to prison camps on other planets. He thought about how much glory and wealth this conquest would bring him. Meanwhile, deep inside the mountains of Colorado, Dr. Helen Torres worked in the most secret place on Earth with her team of scientists. The Mind Bridge Project had started as a simple study of how consciousness worked with quantum physics, but it had quickly become something much more important when humans learned that aliens wanted to destroy Earth. The project had become humanity's only hope for survival. Dr. Mark Davis, who was Helen's assistant, told her that the neural link was working perfectly across all the ships in the Defense Force. He said that the quantum entanglement field was stable and connecting all 17,000 human minds in the fleet. The connection was so strong that thoughts and information could travel instantly between any two people, no matter how far apart they were in space. Helen nodded as she watched the real-time data flowing between 23 ships and 17,000 human brains. Each crew member wore a neural interface that was almost invisible and connected them not just to their own ship's computers, but to every other human in the entire defense network. The interface looked like a tiny piece of metal that stuck behind the ear, and most people forgot they were even wearing it. The aliens had looked at the outside of human technology and seen only simple steel ships with basic plasma weapons and weak deflector shields. What they could not detect or understand was the quantum field that connected every human ship into a single distributed intelligence that could think and react faster than any computer ever built. Mark told Helen that they were getting confirmation from Fleet Command that all ships reported full integration into the network. He said that the time between thinking a thought and turning that thought into action had been reduced to almost nothing across the entire fleet. When one person had an idea, every other person knew about it instantly and could act on it immediately. The bridge of the intrepid Captain Morrison felt the strange and wonderful sensation as his mind expanded beyond his individual thoughts and connected to thousands of other minds. He could sense Lieutenant Carter's tactical calculations and feel Engineer Watson's deep knowledge of how power flowed through the ship's systems. He could experience Navigator Sam Brooks's understanding of three-dimensional space mathematics and how to move through it perfectly. But the connection was not overwhelming or scary. Instead, it felt natural and right, as if humanity had always been meant to work this way. Each person kept their own personality and memories and thoughts, but now they were also part of something much greater than themselves. It was like being a single cell in a huge organism that was incredibly intelligent and powerful. Captain Laura Stone from the heavy cruiser Guardian spoke to Morrison, but her words did not come through sound, but directly into his mind through the quantum connection. She told him that they were detecting movement in the Zephyrian formation, and that the enemy ships were beginning their attack approach. Morrison could feel her thoughts and emotions as clearly as if they were his own. Through the quantum link, Morrison could sense the readiness and determination of every human crew member across the entire fleet. Pilot Nancy White in Fighter Squadron Alpha felt the same calm confidence as Engineer Tony Martinez aboard the Defender. Gunner Chris Johnson on the Sentinel shared tactical knowledge with communications specialist Diane Foster on the Protector. Everyone was connected and everyone was ready. The Zephyrian fleet began moving forward with their weapons charging up with the distinctive energy signatures that had brought fear to civilizations across the galaxy. Their ships moved in the standard Dominion attack pattern, which had always worked before. They would use overwhelming firepower to destroy enemy ships one at a time until nothing was left alive. What the aliens did not understand was that they were not facing 23 separate ships with individual crews making their own decisions. They were about to fight against something completely new in the history of the galaxy. They were confronting a single organism that had 17,000 minds working together in perfect harmony, while each mind remained completely individual and unique. The alien ships got closer, and their weapons got brighter as they prepared to fire the same devastating attack that had destroyed countless enemy fleets throughout galactic history. The Zephyrians expected the human ships to panic and scatter, and try to run away like every other species had done, when faced with such overwhelming force. Instead, something impossible happened. The human fleet began to move with precision that defied every law of physics and military tactics. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be at any moment in time. They flowed through space like a school of fish, with each vessel's movement perfectly coordinated with all the others in ways that should have been completely impossible. Morrison opened his mind fully to the network and felt the tactical genius of 17,000 human minds focusing together on a single problem. The problem was how to defeat an enemy that had 15 times more ships and weapons than they did. The answer came to all of them at the same time in less than 1 second. They would not fight like individual ships trying to survive on their own. They would fight as a single living organism that could think faster than any computer and move more perfectly than any machine. They would show the galaxy what collective intelligence could accomplish when an entire species learned to truly work together. The real battle was about to begin, and the aliens had no idea what they were really fighting against. The first attack from the Zephyrian fleet was exactly what their battle computers had predicted would happen. 300 massive warships opened fire at the same time, creating a wall of deadly energy that included quantum disruptors and antimatter torpedoes. This devastating attack had completely destroyed countless enemy fleets throughout the long history of galactic warfare, and the aliens expected it to work perfectly against the primitive humans. The human ships responded in a way that should have been completely impossible. Instead of panicking and scattering in different directions or trying to run away like every other species had done, the Earth Defense Fleet moved as if it was a single living creature. Every vessel knew exactly where every other vessel would be at any tiny fraction of a second. They flowed through space like a school of fish swimming together, with each ship's movement perfectly coordinated with all the others. Tactical Officer Crix aboard the Devastator stared at his instruments in complete shock and whispered that what he was seeing was impossible. He told Supreme Commander Thexal that the human reaction time was so fast that their sensors could not even measure it properly. He said the human ships were moving as if they all shared the same mind and were controlled by a single intelligence. Thexal watched the tactical display with his 4 eyes getting wider as he saw something that had never happened before in galactic history. The human fleet had not only avoided every single shot from the opening attack, but had somehow moved into perfect position to launch their own attack against his formation. Not one human ship had been damaged or destroyed, even though 300 of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy had been fired directly at them. Thexal thought that maybe the humans had some kind of advanced computer system that was coordinating their movements. He ordered his weapons officers to increase firepower by 40%, because he believed that even the most sophisticated computer could not overcome such a huge disadvantage in numbers. He was sure that more firepower would solve the problem. What Thexal did not understand was that he was not fighting against artificial intelligence or any kind of computer at all. He was fighting against something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy. He was fighting genuine collective intelligence that was maintained by living beings who could think together while remaining completely individual. Aboard, the intrepid Captain Morrison experienced the battle through 17,000 sets of eyes and minds all at the same time. He could feel pilot Kelly Adams in Fighter Wing Beta calculate the perfect path to intercept enemy missiles, while at the same moment he experienced Gunner Steve Parker on the Voyager select the best targeting solutions for attacking the enemy flagship. Every thought and calculation was shared instantly among all humans in the fleet. The quantum entanglement network allowed information to flow faster than the speed of light between human minds, but more importantly, it allowed for processing power that no individual species had ever achieved before. Complex mathematical calculations that would take even the most advanced alien computers many precious seconds to solve were completed instantly by the distributed human consciousness working together as one mind. Captain Jenny Phillips from the Destroyer Storm reported through the neural link that the enemy formation was adapting and trying to overwhelm the human fleet with concentrated fire from multiple ships. Through the quantum connection, every human in the fleet instantly understood her tactical assessment and began preparing for the next phase of the battle. Words were barely necessary when thoughts could be shared directly between minds. The second wave of Zephyrian attacks was more focused and deadly than the first. The alien commanders had decided to target specific human vessels with overwhelming firepower from many ships at once. 100 alien warships turned all their weapons toward the heavy cruiser Guardian, expecting to destroy it completely within seconds. The amount of energy being directed at a single target was enough to melt an entire asteroid into vapor. Instead of destruction, something remarkable happened that changed everything. The human fleet did not just coordinate their movements through space. They coordinated their shield matrices and defensive systems as well. Energy flowed from 19 other human ships through quantum channels to strengthen and reinforce the Guardian's defenses. The concentrated alien firepower struck not just one ship's shields, but the combined defensive capability of the entire human fleet working as one organism. Chief Engineer Paul Wright aboard the Guardian reported calmly through the network that their shields were holding at 97% strength. What should have been an attack powerful enough to destroy any ship in the galaxy had barely registered on their defensive systems. The impossible had become routine for the human collective intelligence. On the Devastator, chaos was beginning to spread through the Zephyrian command staff as their officers tried to understand what they were seeing. Science Officer Veltar reported to Thexal that the energy readings from the human fleet were completely impossible according to all known laws of physics. He said that somehow the human ships were sharing power across distances that should have made such energy transfer impossible, and that their tactical computers could not calculate the true defensive capabilities of the human fleet. Thexal was beginning to feel something he had never experienced before in his long military career. He was starting to feel afraid. He ordered all ships to increase firepower to maximum levels and concentrate all their weapons on the human flagship. 300 alien warships turned their complete attention to the Intrepid and prepared to unleash enough energy to destroy a small moon. Captain Morrison felt the awesome destructive power building in the enemy fleet through the enhanced sensory awareness that came from being connected to thousands of other minds. The amount of energy about to be released was like the output of a star, and any individual ship, no matter how strong, would be completely vaporized in an instant. But the Intrepid was no longer just an individual ship. As the most devastating attack in galactic history struck, the human flagship power flowed through quantum channels from every vessel in the Earth defense fleet. 23 ships became a single defensive organism with their combined shield matrices creating a protective field that seemed to violate every known law of physics and engineering. The energy that should have destroyed a planet struck the Intrepid and was absorbed by the collective defensive power of all humanity working together. The Intrepid not only survived the impossible attack, but barely showed any damage at all. The readings on alien instruments showed that the human flagship had taken a direct hit from enough firepower to destroy an entire world, and had emerged almost completely unharmed. In the command center deep beneath the mountains of Earth, Dr. Torres watched the incredible readings with growing excitement. She told Mark Davis that the humans were not just sharing information through the quantum link anymore. They were sharing energy and processing power and even physical capabilities between ships. She said it was like the entire fleet had become a single living organism with 23 different bodies but one coordinated mind. Morrison opened his mind fully to the network and felt the tactical genius of 17,000 human minds, focusing together on a single question. The question was how to defeat an enemy that still outnumbered them 15-1, even after demonstrating that their defenses were impossible to break. The answer came to all of them at exactly the same time in less than 1 second, and it was so elegant and perfect that Morrison almost smiled. The aliens had seen humanity's defensive capabilities and learned that human ships could not be destroyed by conventional weapons. Now they were about to witness what collective intelligence could accomplish when it decided to go on the attack. The discovery flowed through the human network faster than light itself could travel. 17,000 minds working in perfect harmony had found something that no individual genius could ever have discovered alone. They had identified a fundamental weakness in Zephyrian technology that could end the entire battle with a single perfectly placed shot if they could execute it properly. Dr. Janet Murray from the science vessel Explorer whispered in amazement as the realization hit her consciousness. Through the quantum link, every human in the fleet instantly shared her incredible discovery about the enemy ships. She had found that the alien quantum disruptors were not just weapons, but were actually maintaining a coherent energy field that connected and coordinated their entire fleet together like invisible chains. If the humans could disrupt the exact frequency that held the alien fleet together at precisely the right point, the entire enemy formation would collapse like a house of cards. The energy that made the Zephyrian ship so powerful would turn against them and destroy them from within. But the calculation required to make this work was so complex that it seemed impossible, even for the human collective intelligence. The problem required analyzing the quantum signatures of 300 individual alien ships that were all moving at high speeds through space. They needed to determine the precise harmonic frequency that maintained the fleet cohesion across such vast distances. Then they had to calculate the exact trajectory needed to create a cascading resonance failure that would spread through the entire enemy formation like a chain reaction. No single human mind could have solved such an incredibly complex problem in the time available. No computer that had ever been built could have processed all the variables fast enough to be useful in battle, but 17,000 human minds working together as one collective intelligence completed all the necessary calculations in less than 1 second. Weapons Officer Blake aboard the Intrepid spoke aloud, though every human in the fleet was already experiencing his targeting solution at the same moment through their shared consciousness. He had found the target they needed to hit. It was the flagship's primary quantum disruptor array, and specifically the third resonance chamber, which was no larger than a basketball and was protected by shields that could deflect attacks from entire planetary defense systems. The target was located on the Devastator, which was 3 light minutes away and moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. To hit such a small target at such an incredible distance while both the target and the attacking ships were moving at relativistic speeds would normally be completely impossible. The shot would have to be calibrated to a specific frequency of exactly 7.334 terahertz to create the harmonic disruption they needed. Making this shot would require perfect coordination between multiple ships communicating instantly across impossible distances and timing that was precise to the nanosecond. For any normal fleet composed of individual ships with separate crews making their own decisions, it would have been utterly impossible to even attempt. For humanity's collective consciousness working as a single organism, it was merely very difficult, which meant it was definitely possible if they worked together perfectly. Morrison announced through the quantum link that all ships should prepare for something they called Operation Mindshot. The human fleet began to move with precision that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The Intrepid and Guardian aligned themselves to create a perfect targeting bracket that would allow for the most accurate shot possible. The Defender and Storm adjusted their positions to provide gravitational anchoring points that would stabilize the trajectory of the plasma burst. Fighter squadrons moved to optimal positions throughout the formation to account for relativistic effects that would bend space and time around the projectile. Aboard the Devastator, Supreme Commander Thexal watched the human fleet's strange movements with growing unease that he could not explain. His tactical officer reported that the humans appeared to be coordinating for some kind of precision strike, but said that the distances and speeds involved made any accurate shot completely impossible according to all known military science. Core Tactical officer explained that human targeting systems were primitive compared to Zephyrian technology and could never achieve the precision necessary to hit a specific component on a ship that was so far away. He assured Thexal that whatever the humans were planning, it could not possibly work because the mathematics simply did not support such an attack. Thexal ordered his fleet to maintain their current heading and continue the bombardment of the human flagship. But something about the way the human ships were moving was triggering his deepest survival instincts. He had been a warrior for over a century and had learned to trust his intuition about danger even when logic said otherwise. What the aliens could not understand was that the human fleet no longer used primitive targeting systems or individual ship computers to aim their weapons. 17,000 minds linked through quantum entanglement had created the most sophisticated targeting computer in the history of the galaxy. It was a computer made entirely of living consciousness that could calculate trajectories and compensate for variables that no artificial intelligence had ever been programmed to consider. Gunner Chris Johnson aboard the Sentinel felt the collective calculations flowing through his consciousness like a river of pure mathematical precision. The trajectory, the timing, the exact energy calibration needed to create the harmonic disruption. Every single variable was known to every human in the fleet simultaneously, and they all understood their role in making the impossible shot succeed. Johnson reported that the firing solution was locked and ready, though the words were completely unnecessary since every human already knew this information. The shot itself would not be fired by a single ship but by 5 vessels acting in perfect coordination, as if they were 5 fingers of the same hand. The Intrepid, Guardian, Defender, Storm, and Voyager, each prepared to contribute plasma bursts that would converge at exactly the right moment in exactly the right location, with exactly the right frequency, to create the cascade failure they needed. From the perspective of the Zephyrian fleet, it would appear that the humans were firing randomly into empty space, since the plasma bursts would be aimed at coordinates where no alien ship currently existed. But the human collective had calculated everything, including the future position of the target ship, the curvature of space-time caused by nearby gravitational fields, the quantum uncertainties that affected energy transmission across interstellar distances, and even the subtle effects of dark matter on projectile trajectories. The 5 human ships fired simultaneously, and their plasma bursts streaked through space toward what appeared to be an empty region, far from any enemy vessel. The alien commanders watched with confusion and some relief, thinking that the humans had wasted their attack on nothing and proven that their targeting systems were indeed hopelessly primitive. 3 minutes and 17 seconds after the coordinated, firing the perfectly calculated plasma bursts converged and struck the 3rd resonance chamber of the Devastator's primary quantum disruptor array. The hit was so precise that it struck the exact center of the target component with perfect frequency calibration. The effect was instantaneous and more devastating than even the human collective had predicted. The harmonic disruption began cascading through the quantum field that linked the entire Zephyrian fleet together. Ship after ship lost power as their own weapon systems turned against them, and their defensive shields collapsed from within. The energy matrices that had made the alien ship seem invincible began falling apart in a chain reaction that swept across the entire enemy formation faster than their computers could calculate countermeasures. Within 60 seconds, 300 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had been reduced to drifting, powerless hulks, floating helplessly in space. In the sudden silence that followed the impossible victory, a single transmission reached the human fleet from the crippled Devastator. Supreme Commander Thexal's voice was barely a whisper as he asked the question that would echo throughout galactic history. He simply said, "How?" and waited for an answer that would change everything. Captain Morrison looked out at the disabled alien fleet floating powerlessly in space and felt the collective satisfaction of 17,000 human minds sharing the same moment of victory. The most feared war fleet in galactic history had been defeated not by superior weapons or stronger ships, but by something completely new. They had been beaten by an entire species that had learned to think and work together as one. Morrison opened a communication channel to the crippled Devastator and spoke in a calm voice that carried the confidence of all humanity behind it. He told Supreme Commander Thexal that the aliens had made one critical error in their calculations. They had never considered what would happen when an entire species learned to share consciousness and work together as a single organism while maintaining their individual personalities and freedom. News of humanity's impossible victory began spreading across the galaxy, faster than even quantum communication systems could carry the information. Within just a few days, representatives from every major civilization were sending urgent requests for immediate diplomatic contact with Earth. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were suddenly united in their need to understand what the humans had accomplished. The Galactic Council, which had existed for over 10,000 years as the supreme authority in known space, found itself suddenly facing a crisis that threatened everything they thought they knew about civilization and warfare. Council members who had never questioned the established order were now demanding to know why no one had ever developed anything approaching human collective intelligence. Dr. Helen Torres stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council that was being held through quantum communication links from Earth's newly constructed diplomatic facility. Representatives of 47 different civilizations watched and listened as she calmly explained what they had witnessed during the battle that had changed galactic history forever. Torres told the assembled aliens that the technology they were calling impossible was actually quite simple once you understood how it worked. She explained that human brains operated on quantum frequencies that allowed for genuine information sharing across any distance in space. What they had seen was not advanced weapons or superior ships, but 17,000 minds working together as one collective intelligence. The Saurian delegate Silathek leaned forward with obvious concern and asked if Torres was suggesting that all humans possessed this collective capability. His voice showed the fear that was spreading through every alien civilization as they began to understand the implications of what humanity had discovered about consciousness and cooperation. Torres smiled and confirmed that the collective ability was not limited to humans in the military forces. She told the assembled representatives that all 8 billion humans on Earth possessed the same quantum consciousness capabilities. Humanity had simply not developed the technology to link minds across interstellar distances until they realized they might need to defend themselves against hostile aliens. The chamber fell completely silent as every alien representative began calculating what this meant for the future of galactic civilization. If humans could share consciousness instantly across any distance, then traditional concepts of military strategy, economic competition, and political control became meaningless, almost overnight. Constructor Unit Prime 7 spoke first with its mechanical voice sounding uncertain for the first time in its existence. The artificial intelligence calculated that the tactical applications of collective consciousness would be unlimited, and that a single human fleet could coordinate military operations across an entire galaxy instantaneously without any delay or communication problems. Etherian delegate Zixara added that collective intelligence of this magnitude could solve scientific problems that had puzzled their civilizations for thousands of years. The processing power of billions of minds working together would make breakthrough discoveries in physics, medicine, and technology almost routine rather than rare events that took decades to achieve. Captain Morrison, who was attending the session, From the bridge of the Intrepid watched the alien representatives with carefully controlled amusement. Just 6 months earlier, these same beings had been preparing to conquer Earth and turn all humans into slaves. Now they were desperately trying to understand how to coexist with a species that had fundamentally changed the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Morrison told the assembly that the important question was what would happen now that everything had changed. He emphasized that Earth had no desire for conquest or empire building, and that humans had never wanted the conflict that had been forced upon them by alien aggression and threats of slavery. The Zephyrian representative who had replaced the disgraced commanders who lost the battle asked Morrison if humanity would use their collective consciousness capability for expansion and domination, like every other powerful species had done throughout galactic history. The question revealed how difficult it was for aliens to imagine any other way of using great power. Dr. Torres explained that this was the most interesting aspect of collective intelligence and what made it completely different from traditional military power. She said that when you could genuinely share thoughts and experiences with others, the concept of conquest became pointless and unnecessary. When beings could simply share knowledge and capabilities, there was no need to take what others possessed by force. Over the following months, a completely new type of civilization began to emerge throughout the galaxy. Rather than the traditional galactic order that was based on military dominance, resource control, and competitive advantage, humanity proposed something that had never been attempted before. They suggested creating a truly cooperative, interstellar community based on mutual benefit and shared consciousness. Species from across the galaxy began requesting to join what became known as the Collective Initiative. This was not a military alliance or trade agreement, but something far more profound and revolutionary. It was a gradual sharing of knowledge, technology, and even consciousness itself between different forms of life that had evolved on completely different worlds. Some species, like the Etherians, discovered that they possessed latent quantum consciousness capabilities similar to humans that could be developed and enhanced with proper guidance and technology. Other species, like the Constructors, found that their mechanical nature allowed for different but equally valuable forms of collective intelligence that complemented human abilities perfectly. The Zephyrians, who had been humbled by their unexpected defeat, became some of humanity's most dedicated partners in developing interspecies cooperation protocols. Their military expertise, combined with human collective consciousness, created defensive capabilities that made the galaxy safer for all peaceful civilizations. A full year after the battle that changed everything, Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Unity. This was a vessel that had been designed and built through the combined efforts of 12 different species working together. Around him, human and alien crew members worked side by side with their minds linked through quantum networks that respected individual consciousness, while enabling unprecedented cooperation between different forms of life. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, who had become his new tactical officer, reported that they were receiving transmissions from the outer colonies. 3 more species had requested membership in the Collective Initiative and wanted to learn about shared consciousness technologies that could help them contribute to the growing interstellar community. Morrison nodded and felt the gentle presence of his crew's minds in the quantum network. It was not the overwhelming collective consciousness they had used during wartime, but something more subtle and voluntary. It was a chosen sharing of purpose and understanding that made every task easier and every relationship more meaningful. Morrison told Kim to send the new species their standard welcome package and let them know that the galaxy had room for everyone who was willing to work together peacefully. He watched through the viewport as ships from dozens of different civilizations moved in perfect harmony through space, with their crews linked not by conquest or fear, but by the simple revolutionary idea that different beings could choose to think together while remaining magnificently individual. The species that had once been mocked for their primitive technology had not only survived first contact with galactic civilization, but had fundamentally changed what it meant to be alive and conscious in the universe. Earth's defense had indeed been mocked by those who thought superior firepower was the only thing that mattered. But one perfectly impossible shot had proven that when humanity chose to work together, there was no limit to what they could accomplish through cooperation and shared consciousness. The age of individual species competing for dominance and resources was finally over after thousands of years of warfare and suffering. The age of collective intelligence and voluntary cooperation had begun, and it promised a future brighter than any civilization had ever dared to imagine possible.